Hello, it's Bob Pandolfo on Tuesday, May 27th, 2025. Welcome to Power Pace with Pandy. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how to get out of a slump and a spot play kind of system for thoroughbred handicapping. But I want to start out with something about Christopher Clement, who passed away, a great trainer. Um, you know, I have to admit, like, as far as myself being a fan of racing, I mainly am a fan of the horses. I remember years ago, like when a great horse was racing, that's when I really said we got to go to the track. I remember Ruffian. I saw her a couple times. I saw her in the 3-year-old debut at Aqueduct in the Cumley Stakes. I called a friend of mine. I said, "Let's go see this filly. I think she's like the greatest filly of all time, quite possibly." And there were people, just waiting for her to come out. She was magnificent. That's what brings people to the track. The stars of the sport are not the jockeys or the trainers, it's the horses. Those are the stars of the sport. And I have, I'm like anybody else as a fan, I have my favorite jockeys and stuff. I don't have a lot of, trainers that I can really honestly say I'm a fan of. I respect the trainers, but there were two trainers who I was a fan of. One was Alan Jerkins, and the other one was Christopher Clement. Now they're both deceased, unfortunately. Clement passed away at the age of 59 a few days ago from some sort of rare eye cancer. And I'll tell you, why I was such a fan. He was very similar to Jerkins, and the reason why I liked him, and that was because as a bettor, his horses they ran consistently well. If you look at his record, it's pretty remarkable. First of all, he's known as a turf trainer, and he did win 34 Grade 1 stakes on turf. And so he won 41 Grade 1 stakes, 34 of them were on turf. But his win percentage, if you break it down here, his win percentage on the main track is 19%, and his win percentage, and this is for his whole career, his win percentage on turf is 20%, and on the main track, dirt and synthetic, is 19%. So he won at least 19% on any time, on any surface. If you look over his career here, it's really remarkable. Last year 19%, 2023 17%, then 20%, 21%, 20%, 19%, 18%, 19, 20, 20. It's always 20s, 19s, 24, 21. I mean, he started out in 1991. He only had 13. That was when he came here from France with his wife. And so then he had a couple of years where he was 13%, but after that, it was just, really remarkable. And his earnings kept going up. He had his best years, 3 of his best 4 years were 3 of the last 4 years. 10 million purse earnings, 10 million, just under 10 million. And last year's, as far as earnings, his best year ever, 12.7 million. So his horses always looked great on the track. And the thing is, he was good at everything. He was one of the best in the business with first-time starters. He was one of the best in the business with turf. He was one of the best with layoffs. As far as, horses, some of you may remember that he had Tonalist who won the Belmont Stakes. And Tonalist also won 2 Jockey Gold Clubs. And he had Gio Ponte, a 7-time Grade 1 winner. And then he won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf with Pizza Bianca. He was in the top 10 in earnings for trainers 8 out of 10 times, 8 of the last 10 years. And in the last, from 2000 to 2024, he was in the top 25 earners every year. Very consistent. And the thing is too, and this is the only other thing I want to say about this. One of the reasons why I'm not a big fan of a lot of trainers, because I don't really know for sure who's honest. But I have statistics of trainers and their record of violations, whether it's drug violations or, different fines and suspensions, and also how healthy their horses were, how many horses died in their care, how many horses broke down. And it's really remarkable. Clement, if you go back just a few years ago, there were only 2 trainers in the entire sport who had been in the business as long as Clement and Graham Motion. They were the only trainers that had 0 drug violations, and this was as a few years ago. Now I think Clement got one, because now that they made the drug violations stricter for a while there. They're trying to adjust them now with HISA. I think he got one minor violations for an overage of one of the allowed drugs. But I mean he, there are a lot of trainers that all these multiple, like 15, 20, 25, over 30 violations. And the thing is, his horses, you can tell. Excuse me. You can tell they were well cared for. They looked great on a track. They looked healthy. They ran healthy. They stayed healthy. And he was a great horseman. He was critical when some trainers were suspended a few years ago. He was critical of that. He says, that's not fair. There was a trainer who was suspended, and he says that guy finished in front of me a few times in stakes races. I finished second behind him, and I got cheated. But he was, and by all accounts, I never met him. By all accounts, he was a really good man too. He had a lot of friends in the business. So anyway, his son Miguel will be taking over the stable, and I wish him the best of luck. So I just wanted to mention that because that's really, outside of Alan Jerkins, this is the only trainer I can honestly say I was truly a long-term fan of, and I cashed a lot of tickets on because his horses are going to run well, and all the things he can do because he was good. Great with first-time stars. He had these patterns and they were consistent. Look at it. I mean, look at all these numbers, just consistent year in and year out. So let me get to the point of my handicapping part of this now. Years ago, somebody wrote me a letter, and I got a few letters like this, and they said to me, I'm in a slump. I think I'm playing too many races. How do you get out of a slump? And I said, just focus on, narrow your scope. I said, just bet on horses that are dropping in class, for one. That's it. If the horse isn't dropping in class, don't bet them. And, that was just, and now there was more to it because I wrote an article about it. But just to give you a brief overlook, yesterday at Belmont on my selections that I sell to the public. Sometimes I put them for free on my website, handicapwinners.com. I had Lady Firefoot, on top in first race. In a 4-horse race, she paid $12.20. She was dropping out of stakes races. All right, paid $12.20. In the second race, Love You Miss Mina, whatever her name was, she won. I also picked her on top, and she paid $5.50. She was dropping back into a claiming race and to a career low. She had raced for $75,000 tag. She was in for $50 for the first time. She won. I had Lollipops as my best bet. She was making her first offer a tag, and she won wire to wire. I paid $6.70. So I actually had the double cold for $59 and the pick 3 cold for $1. I paid $75.50. I also had the 4th race on top. Now this horse, City Blocks, had made her first start for the tag last start, and she had earned by far the highest pace figures in the field in a very fast pace off track. So I'm back to her a second time for a tag. Only the second time in her career she's racing for a tag. She won by 10 lengths, paid $5.40. So I had the first 4 winners. So you had 3 horses dropping down, and then this horse, second time racing for a tag after earning by far the best pace figures in the race. And then Trust Fund. Trust Fund I picked second. I had the exacta, which paid like $31.20. Trust Fund paid $19. First time, I believe it's first time for a tag. Here, let's take a look at it. It's interesting too because Todd Pletcher, first time claiming, is 29%. He's always been good at that. They buy horses basically to win stakes races. Once they realize they're not going to win stakes races, they'll drop them in and they do very well. First time tag, Trust Fund, $19, and I had that. Now that horse I had picked second. I didn't have that one on top. I did have the exacta because I had the favorite ran second. So then you go to the 7th race, Save Us Millennia. She had raced in a race with an optional claiming price of $50,000. She was dropping into an optional claiming race of $32,000. She won. I had her second. I think I picked Smoking Hot Kitty, but that was another drop down winner on the day. And then let's see, the 8th race. This was the first time turf horse, so that wasn't dropping. And then in the last race, I had Right to Win on top. First time for a tag, paid $3.60. So let's see, you had first, second, and third race were all drop downs. 4th race was second off the drop. So you had 3 drop downs, 4 drop downs with trust fund, 5 drop downs with Save Us Millennia. So 6 of the 9 horses were dropping in class. On my comments on my New York sheet that sold at the track, for Lady Fairfoot, I said key drop, and I put her on top, paid $12.20. For the second race, Love Miss You Mean It, I said the same thing, key drop. So these were significant drops. You know what I mean? It wasn't like they were dropping from a $20,000 claim to a $15,000. This horse was first time tagged. Lady Firefoot start dropping out of stakes races. So Lollipops, first time tag. That's what you call a key drop. Again, if you really want to specialize, you could just look for key drops. In fact, I'll put a list underneath this. I'll just type out some things that I think are key drops. But sometimes you just gotta focus in on something that works, and not because sometimes when you're playing a lot of horses or anything, you're playing horses that really don't have much of a chance, or not that they don't have much of a chance, but they're in a very competitive field. They don't really have an edge. And I've talked about this before. You're getting 5-2 odds, 4-1 odds, 2-1 odds, and there's no value. There's no edge. These horses all had a significant edge because they were taking key drops in class. They were, and that's. And I'm more of a class handicapper than I am a speed handicapper, and than I am a trip handicapper. Class to me comes first, then speed and pace. Let's put it this way: class, speed, and pace. I put those together, and then trips. And then the trainers and the percentage of the trainers and everything would come after that. So I just want to do a short video about that today, and I'll put some notes underneath this video. But just remember that just specialize a little more if you're in a slump, if you're not doing well, and pick your spots that you're going to bet a little more carefully. And key drop in class, one of the best angles that there is. So anyway, thanks for tuning in. Do me a favor and subscribe to my channel. It's free, and that's very important to me, and I really appreciate you dropping in to watch my video, and lots of luck.